Sachin, welcome to the Interviewing the Experts. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I was blown away actually by your presentation at the Consumer Health Summit on breath, and so I thought it would just be a disservice to not share this information with Sleep Science Academy members and the people that are going to be listening to this on the YouTube channel. So welcome to the podcast here. So let me just briefly, I'm going to read your bio, but then I want to hear a little bit about your story, what got you into breath work and all the work you're doing now. So Sachin Patel is a father, he's a husband, he's a philanthropist, a functional medicine practice success coach. He's a speaker and author, a breathwork facilitator, and a plant medicine advocate. And Sachin is convinced that the doctor of the future is the patient, and he's committed himself to helping raise others' consciousness, activate their inner doctor, and their deepest healing through the use of lifestyle and breath work. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you, my friend Devin. I'm so excited. You have one of my most favorite names on the planet. My son's name is Devin, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity to connect with you further and also with your community. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's dive right into it. So, I mean, you've studied so many different things. You've done so many different things, and you've came back to the breath. So, what really intrigued you with, really diving deep and understanding breathing and breath work? Because I know your background is pretty comprehensive and you study a lot of things, but you came back to one of the most simple things, something that we take for granted, we don't really think about, breathing. So, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for asking. First of all, just to give the reader some context, the listener some context, I'm originally trained as a chiropractor, so you can't get that out of me. I'm still a chiropractor at heart. And then I trained in functional medicine to get a little bit closer to the root cause. And then I trained in lifestyle medicine. And then I experienced breath work. And that really opened up my eyes to a unique and new opportunity that was literally, right under our noses this whole time, but nobody had really created an experience for me around breathing. So everyone tells you to breathe better. Everyone tells you to hold your breath a certain way or exhale or inhale when you're exercising. And that's, the kind of extent of, formal coaching that I had in breathing. It was mainly around exercise, but I never knew you could use your breath to create profound spiritual experiences or release trauma and really alter your physiology in any way that you desire. And it wasn't until I experienced that myself. I went to a Wim Hof class, and my now friend and mentor, Giovanni, was hosting the event. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. A buddy of mine told me to come. So I jumped on and jumped along and went with him. By the end of the training, I was holding my breath for about 3.5 minutes. And we jumped into this little kiddie pool filled with ice and water. And we did the ritualistic ice plunge afterwards. I just felt so alive, and I fell in love with the community aspect of it. I fell in love with what I could do with my body, and how quickly my body responded to the intervention, and how measurably it responded. Because there's very few things that you do in functional medicine that are instantaneous, right? Some of these things take days or weeks, sometimes months, for you to see a benefit. And I'm persistent yet impatient, and I like to see results. And really what I like to know is this working for me? I don't want to wait a month to find out if it's working. I want to know right now. And how do I measure that? And so breath gave me a tool to be able to measure, wow, this is working. When I started this, I could only hold my breath for 90 seconds, and now I can hold it for 180. There's a measurable delta there of improvement. So that was the initial, spark that lit for me. And then I became friends with my instructor, Gio, and he was leading some various ceremonies, and one of them was a breathwork ceremony. So I went to it, and I had an even more profound experience than I had using plant medicines. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like, I didn't know I could get into these type of altered states using my breath. And so we went from like Wim Hof, which is like breath holds and pushing yourself physically, to then using our breath to push ourselves spiritually and heal ourselves, which was really quite profound for me. And so then I got trained with Gio and became a facilitator of the elemental rhythm breathwork experience. And that's what you had a chance to experience in Arizona when we were together. And from there, I started hosting events online, adding it to our community events that we would host for practitioners. And then what I realized is that there's so much more here. So there's,
Mm,
not just the spiritual benefits of exercise or of breathwork exercises. There's the obviously physical benefits of exercise, but then there's like physiological benefits. And that's when I came across James Nestor's work. And right around that time, my son was in the process of having some dental work done. He was about, I guess, was our 8 or 9 or at that time. And the dentist wanted to pull his teeth because his facial structure was too small to house his teeth. And he's a handsome little boy. So we didn't really, we were kind of caught off guard, to be honest. And turns out that he was a habitual mouth breather and his upper palate didn't form correctly.
mm,
And all these different dentists wanted to pull his teeth. And so I was reading James Nestor's work at that time. And, he said, and I agreed with him, is that, there's really not, we don't have too many teeth. Our faces are too small. And so then I learned about what was causing our facial structure to be too small. And we started correcting that with my son. So the positioning of our tongue affects our facial structure. The food that we eat affects our facial structure. The way we breathe affects our facial structure. And so that became very near and dear to me because I wanted to make sure my son had all of his teeth and that he had a nice, beautiful smile and an open airway so he could breathe correctly. So, my journey with breath has really, connected me more with my family. It's connected me more with myself. It's connected me more with my clients that I work with, the communities that I work with. So it's really been a vehicle for me to educate people and to create shifts in them. But I was still, while I was learning all this and doing all of this, what I realized is that nobody was teaching this.
mm.
And so I'm like, this has been around for hundreds of years or thousands, literally since the birth of humanity. It's been around forever, and nobody's really teaching it in a way that it's landing for practitioners where they're really connecting all the dots. So then that became my mission: is how do I help people connect all the dots and use breath as the lead domino that helps them improve other areas of their health. And as I went down that rabbit hole, I realized that breath affects our immune system, breath affects our lymphatic system, breath affects our circulatory system, breath affects our emotional state, breath affects our sleep, breath affects, so many different areas
Mm,
of our health. And in measurable ways and in very easy to measure rapid changes that can take place for people. So it doesn't take long to feel the benefit. It doesn't take long to measure the benefit. And it's the barrier of entry is like basically zero. We all have the apparatus
mhm,
that we need. Somebody just has to teach us how to use it. So my mantra and practice has always been, how do I find the simplest, most cost-effective, scalable solutions to help
mm,
people get healthy and activate their own inner healing mechanisms? And breath was the thing I've been looking for my entire life. And again, no pun intended, but the answer was right under my nose. But it was almost too embarrassingly simple, right? So that's
mm,
why a lot of people ask me, why does this stuff get overlooked? Why isn't anyone talking about this? And part of it is because in North America and many cultures, we're looking for the latest, greatest technological breakthrough. And what I'm here to tell everyone is that breath is both art and science. So there's so many different ways that we can breathe. So there is a bit of an art to it because it can be individualized for the person. And there's a technology behind it as well. It activates our own inner technology. And that's what I always encourage people to look at is how do we blend the art and the science of breathing so that not only does it continue to stand the test of time, but it also stands the test of scientific scrutiny. And literally, there's thousands of articles in PubMed that have been published about breathing. And the reason you don't hear more and more about it, or you won't hear about it on the evening news, is because it's not a big pharma play, right? There's really nothing to sell you except giving you the
mm,
age old wisdom, and then just helping you, get better at it, right? And perhaps measure it. So there are ways to measure your breath and breathing. There are tools and wearables and things like that can help you enhance it. But once you know how to do it, it's just you and your breath. And, thank God it's with you everywhere you go. So it's always available for you to access whatever part of you needs to be accessed.
mm. So good. It's amazing. And what it's so interesting is, like you said, it's been under your nose the whole time. It's like this thing. So let's start with the science. to get really people intrigued with, why this is so important. And then let's go into the art. And then maybe we can round the conversation out with some of the technology and some of the tools that people could use to help them really implement some of the things that you're going to be sharing. So, and I was so fascinated by what you said in your presentation. There's so many things. I have so many notes. But 50% of the population breathe through their mouth. That just really stuck with me. And
Mhm.
so let's start with, why is maybe nose breathing better than mouth breathing? What can someone expect when they start to, consciously breathe through their nose? What are the benefits of that? And then let's kind of take it into some of the other things.
Yeah, so there's so many reasons to breathe through your nose, and I'll list a whole bunch of them. Um, so one is we breathe through our nose because our nose is specifically designed as an intake. The nose actually slows air down because we don't want the air to rapidly enter into our lungs. We want the air to slow down. We want it to be conditioned. We want it to be perfected. So when it goes into our lungs, it's temperature regulated, it's pressure regulated, it's moisture regulated, it's remove all the big particulates have been removed, and all the fine particulates in many ways have been removed as well. So we have this ornate structure, these turbinates that are on the inside of our face, and these will help with filtering the air, pressurizing the air, moisture regulating the air, and temperature regulating the air. And the nose is actually an interesting organ because it biologically also cleanses the air. So it's your biodefense against the outside world. Each day we breathe about 30 pounds of air. So if you just think about that for a minute, we consume more air than anything else that goes into our body. And so we're interacting with the outside world through the air that we breathe. And so that's one of the reasons we want to breathe through our nose. The other reason is because our nose is lined with nitric oxide producing mucus. And so the bacteria in our mouth, when we have the right type of bacteria in our mouth and the right nutrients in our body, they make something called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide kills viruses, bacteria, and pathogens on contact. So it's our initial defense system against, invading pathogens. The other thing nitric oxide does is it helps dilate our blood vessels. And what that means is our blood vessels get nice and wide, which means that there's less pressure required to move blood through the vessels. So it naturally lowers our blood pressure. The other thing nitric oxide does is it increases microcirculation. So if I want to get more blood flow to my brain or my fingertips or my genitals, as an example, I want to increase my nitric oxide levels. Breathing simply through your nose will increase nitric oxide levels in the blood sixfold. And
Wow.
breathing through your nose and humming, so you breathe in through your nose and hum on the exhale through the nose, will increase your nitric oxide by 15-fold. So we can improve our biodefense mechanism. We can lower our blood pressure. We can increase microcirculation by simply breathing correctly. Now, for those people that aren't familiar with this, but initially Viagra was developed as a medication to help recirculate and recycle the nitric oxide that we produce. And what they found, and it was initially developed as it was initially developed as a blood pressure lowering medication because that's what
Mm.
nitric oxide does. But what they found in men, when men are most commonly studied versus women and children, and what they found was an interesting side effect. And they said, well, this is way better than lowering people's blood pressure. Let's give them 4-hour erections by cranking up their nitric oxide levels. So that's a funny story about how Viagra became such a blockbuster drug. It was initially developed to lower blood pressure, and the mechanism of action is to recirculate the nitric oxide levels that you produce. Now, what's interesting is that during COVID, they would prescribe men nitric oxide through Viagra to actually help them combat COVID. So
Wow.
it's actually a known beneficial nutrient or beneficial molecule, rather, to help with our immune health. When we breathe through our mouth, it dries out our saliva, which then kills the bacteria that help us make nitric oxide. So that's one of the reasons we want to ensure that we're breathing through our nose as much as we can. Our nose is one of those organs, if we don't use it, we lose it. So people who are habitual mouth breathers, what you will find is when they start breathing through their nose, it feels really constrained or obstructive to them. But the more you do it, the more your nose will open up. And just keep in mind that your nose is designed to slow the air down. So it's always going to feel more restrictive. So if I take a sharp inhale through my nose, it's always going to feel a little bit harder to pull in as much air versus my mouth, because my mouth doesn't pressurize the air. When you pressurize the air through your nose, you're actually getting 20% more oxygen delivery into the body as well. So there's actually a greater efficiency by breathing through your nose than breathing through your mouth. The other benefit of breathing through your nose is it allows you to place your tongue in the correct tongue position. So this was something I never, as a chiropractor, you think we would learn everything about posture. And the one muscle that we didn't learn anything about in terms of posture is the tongue. The tongue is
Mm.
actually a postural muscle. And your tongue is quite fascinating when you think about it. Parts of it attach to a bone in your neck called the hyoid bone. And the hyoid bone attaches to your shoulder through a muscle called the omohyoid. So it's not uncommon for people who have poor tongue posture to have chronic neck and shoulder pain because their tongue isn't positioned correctly. So if you were to place your tongue at the roof of your mouth, just behind your front two teeth, what ends up happening is your mouth naturally seals itself. Your vagus nerve has a lot of nerve endings just behind your front teeth, so it instantly relaxes you. This is why children will suck their thumbs to soothe themselves or use a pacifier to soothe themselves, because it hits that magic button at the roof of their mouth. And what also happens is the muscles in the cervical spine relax, because now the tongue is holding the front of the head up instead of these extensor muscles in the neck doing that job. So tongue positioning, believe it or not, plays a huge
Mm.
role in our overall health and wellness. And another thing that people may or may not know is that we have something called a myofascial matrix in our body. And this myofascial matrix is basically a uh, web-like structure that literally envelopes and wraps around every cell, tissue, and organ in our body. In fact, it's the system through which every nucleus of every cell in your body is connected with one another.
Mm.
So it's kind of an amazing system, and it was just discovered in this current century, in the 21st century. And before, when we used to do anatomy dissections, we would just cut through the matrix. We just thought it was just like goop. We didn't really think anything of it. But it's this fabric that connects every single thing in your body. So, in fact, your tongue is connected all the way to the tip of your toes.
Wow.
And so, one of the things we're seeing more and more of that is a result of a variety of different reasons. One of them being poor methylation, is nowadays kids are being born with more and more tongue ties.
Mm.
And a tongue tie is basically this little frenulum that connects your tongue to the bottom of your mouth. And when that tie becomes really thick, or if it's too long, it restricts the motion of the tongue. So it prevents people from being able to put, especially young children, from being able to put their tongue in the roof of their mouth.
Mm.
This actually was the case for my wife. She had a tongue tie growing up, didn't know it. And so she had a hard time latching when she was trying to breastfeed. And she also would suck her thumb. And when children suck their thumb, it actually pushes their upper palate upwards and makes their airways smaller. And it also can cause an open bite because the jaw comes forward and the teeth come forward. So she ended up having to have braces 3 different times because of this. And it wasn't until she finally met with an airway dentist that they were able to correct this open bite, and they were able to address her issues. But this is a common thing. It's much more common than people think. And when she had her tongue tie removed, her neck pain instantly disappeared that she had
Wow.
for as long as she could remember, because it was creating this restriction. Her hamstring flexibility improved instantly right after the
Wow.
procedure, because that entire system, that entire fascial system got released, and her body was able to move much better. So our tongue is like a very fascinating muscle that nobody really talks about. It helps us taste food. It helps us speak and articulate ourselves. It acts as a spacer. So that's why the positioning of the tongue is so important, because when the tongue is positioned correctly in the roof of the mouth, it pushes the teeth outwards and acts like, it prevents the face from collapsing inward. And so when we position our tongue correctly, then it allows our airways to develop nice, wide, and open, but it also allows for our palatal arch to develop correctly and our dental arch to develop correctly as well. And when we don't put our tongue in the right position, then our face caves in, things get really small, and therefore it becomes even more restrictive to breathe through the nose. So then people end up breathing through their mouth because their nose just feels so restricted to breathe through. And that habitual mouth breathing then causes them to develop adenoids and tonsillitis. And guess what? They end up getting these structures removed, but it's actually caused by the mouth breathing itself.
Wow.
So if we remove the adenoids and tonsils, we don't actually fix the problem. We perpetuate the problem because the children will continue breathing in and out through their mouth and never address the issue. And for what it's worth, since we're on the topic of children, about 10% of children snore. Most children, you'll find, if you just pay attention to young kids, they're habitual mouth breathers. So you really have to, I was going to say beat that into them, but you have to, that's not the right word.
No.
You really have to gently instill that wisdom into them to breathe through their noses. In many cultures, actually, I'm learning this more and more. In many cultures, it's like a cardinal sin to breathe through your mouth. In
Wow.
Western culture, we insult somebody by calling them a mouth breather, and in Eastern cultures, it's actually like you get your hand slapped if you're breathing through your mouth. So I don't
Hmm.
think they necessarily understood all the biological and somatic effects necessarily, but they just somehow we've known this for many years that breathing through your nose is far advantageous for you. um, Here's an interesting fun fact. So your mouth is the dirtiest part of your body. So if you ask any microbiologist what's the dirtiest part of your body, most people might say your butt or your hands or other parts of you, but it's actually your mouth.
Hmm.
So the, the importance of that is that if you're breathing in 23,000 times a day, you don't want to be breathing in all the bacteria that's in your mouth. The bacteria in your mouth belongs in your mouth. When you swallow your saliva, as an example, the acids in your stomach kill all those bugs. So they die on contact. But when it goes into your lungs, then your lung has an immune system and it has its own microbiome, which is a collection of bacteria. Now your immune system is on high alert all day, every day, just by you sitting there breathing incorrectly. But if we breathe through our nose, it cleanses the air. It conditions the air, as I mentioned earlier. So there's so many benefits of breathing through the nose versus the mouth. And then one more thing about about mouth breathing, is that the number one cause of cavities is mouth breathing. And
Hmm.
that was a shocking fact to me, but it made sense because when I went to my son's first dental appointment, um, you know, the dentist is like, we've got good news, we've got bad news. The bad news is your son has a ton of cavities, which we were shocked by because he doesn't eat any crap. And the good news is they're all in his baby teeth. So we're like, okay, well, he doesn't have to have any dental work done, which I think would have traumatized him. But the dentist didn't tell us it was about the way he was breathing. They didn't even mention that once. They weren't
Interesting.
concerned at all. However, when I went through James Nestor's trainings and read his book and listened to a ton of his podcasts and stuff, I realized, oh my God, my son was a mouth breather. And then it all made sense. It made sense why his upper palate was so small. It made sense why he had cavities. It made sense why his behavior at times was a little bit erratic. It made sense that he would drool all over his pillow at night. And we thought it was the cutest thing. And we have tons of pictures to prove it and embarrass him with at his wedding. However, it's not funny, right? In the sense that we were laughing. It's comical when we share the story, but at the same time, it's serious stuff because had we known that and had we done something about it, we wouldn't have had to spend like $10,000-$15,000 correcting his bite, and he wouldn't have to go through all the trauma of having braces and arch
Hmm.
expanders. And I'm sure he wishes we knew better as well.
Well, I can say from personal experience, I am exactly like your son, Devin. Literally, I had braces 3 times, had a roof palate expander, had a bunch of cavities. And so, like, literally, I can attest to everything you're saying from personal experience. And I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I have a lot of questions based off of everything you just shared, but I want to start with just something simple. How can somebody tell if they have a tongue tie? Like, if somebody, would they be aware? Is there like a test? Would somebody, how would you know if you had a tongue tie?
Yeah, so there's actually I mean, some people will know. So if you can't put your tongue at the roof of your mouth and open your mouth like this,
Okay.
okay, then you probably have a tongue tie. And you probably want to, like, I'm not going to encourage people to self-assess, because there's some people that may have a tongue tie and think that they don't.
Mm,
Whereas if they went to a professional and had an assessment done, then they might be assessed with it. My wife didn't know her whole life that she had a tongue tie. So, but when we connected all the dots, I'm like, you for sure have a tongue tie. And she was in denial about it. And she went to the dentist and they're like, no, you have a significant tongue tie. And it's a very simple procedure. So it's just a laser procedure that you can have done. Takes just a couple seconds to do it. And the tongue, interestingly enough, a fun fact about the tongue, that pound for pound, your tongue is the strongest muscle,
mm,
and your tongue is the fastest tissue in your body to heal. And so it heals very quickly. Feels a little bit weird, she said at first, but it heals really quickly. And then you have to do some myofunctional exercises so that you've got this newfound range of motion. You've got to train your tongue to be able to go through those ranges of motion and strengthen it as well. So it's a pretty non-invasive procedure. I mean, everyone is going to have their own experience with it, but I would connect with an airway dentist. If you go to askthedentist.com, you can connect with a dentist that is specifically trained and they're airway focused, not just focused on your teeth. Dentists actually play a much bigger role than they lead on to, or at
mm.
least they could, right? They could stay, strictly cosmetic. They could stay strictly with cleaning and cavity removal and stuff like that. But when you start getting into more advanced dental practices, then a lot of them will focus on the airway. And I coach a few dental practices and we focus on whole health. So we understand that the mouth is a gateway to so many different things. I mean, as a functional medicine practitioner, your mouth is the beginning of your digestive system. Your nose is the beginning of your immune system, right? These are big systems in our body that can have significant challenges. And so just understanding how this whole area of your face works and using it correctly can make a huge difference for people.
So I want to ask too. So 50% of the population mouth breather. You kind of touched on a little bit. Is there with the nitrous oxide? But why is if breathing from the nose has all these benefits, which it clearly does? Why do half of the population breathe from their mouth? I mean, you sort of touched on it there, but I'm just
Mhm.
curious if there's a little bit more to that.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is they just don't know,
Okay.
right?
So yeah.
They've just breathed that way their entire life. And here's the other thing. It's a lot of it is unconscious. So here's what I want people to pay attention to. Those people might be listening to this and they're obviously now paying attention to whether they're breathing through their mouth or nose. And
Mm,
they might find that, oh, I'm breathing through my nose. Like I don't breathe through my mouth. I'm totally okay. But the moment they start climbing some steps, the moment they go for a walk, the moment they start exerting themselves, they're going to default to breathing through their mouth. So you have to pay attention to how you're breathing, not just now while you're listening to this, but how are you breathing in all the different activities that you're doing? And there is a time and place to breathe through your mouth, right? So if I'm doing an all out sprint, then I'm going to be breathing in and out through my mouth as fast as I can, because that would be the smart thing to do. Because every time I breathe in and out, my lungs expand and contract. My diaphragm is rapidly moving up and down. That's actually helping my heart pump blood. So I would want to leverage that, right? I'm not going to breathe like that all the time. But if I'm trying to escape a situation or trying to push myself as hard as I can on a sprint or lifting weights or something, then I'm going to do that. Or I might find myself breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth, right? If I want to rapidly release the CO2 that's building up. So I think it's a lot of it has to do with how we breathe unconsciously. And when we exert ourselves. The other thing I would say is that, and maybe we talked about this a bit, is that if we weren't trained to breathe through our nose as children, the airway gets more constricted and smaller. And so it becomes harder to breathe through your nose. Some people's noses get really stuffy, they get congested. And so the easy thing to then do is to default and start breathing through the mouth because there's no resistance or restriction there. So it could be allergies, it could be small airways, it could be mucus that's building up because of diets and inflammation. It
mm,
could be, there's people that, are inhaling mold and all kinds of different things because they're not using air purifiers in their homes. So there's a variety of reasons why people's airways can get congested, and then it's just easy for them to breathe through. It's much easier for them to breathe through their mouth. Now at nighttime, because I'm a habitual nose breather just by default. Maybe I had that conditioned into me as a child. I don't know. But when I was breathing at night, I would have the tendency to snore, and it turns out that my mouth would fall open, and I would potentially breathe through my mouth at that point. So 66% of people breathe through their mouth while they sleep. And I think some of that has to do with posture, so the position that they sleep in. And some of it's going to have to do, obviously, with tongue positioning. And then some of it's going to have to do with just how relaxed their jaw gets, and it just kind of falls open. And then as a result of that, air takes the path of least resistance. So they're going to end up breathing through their mouth. And that could lead to snoring, that could lead to dry mouth. Mouth breathing is a diuretic, so it makes us actually use the bathroom more. So people who breathe through their mouths during the day or while they sleep are going to have the tendency to wake up more frequently to use the restroom. So there's a variety of consequences of mouth breathing, but the reason why people breathe through their mouth could vary from person to person.
I want to
One,
put a pin in what you just said. I want to stop you just for a second. I want to make sure everyone really heard what you just said, because so many people wake up in the middle of the night to use the restroom, and then their mind starts to go, and so what you just said, you said if people really paid attention and started to breathe through their nose, there's less of a likelihood that they're actually going to need to wake up to use the restroom.
yep.
That
So
like really important pin right there. Like we kind of just breezed right over that, but that's like there's so many people, and then the whole snoring. I wrote this down in my notes here. You said snoring is the third leading cause of divorce, which I thought was fascinating.
mhm.
And we get this question all the time from our clients at Sleep Science Academy. My partner snores, and it drives me insane. What do you recommend that I do about it? And I'd love to hear your thoughts, because currently it's, CPAP pretty much. That's the solution. But what you're touching on and what you're sharing is, I think it's kind of addressing the root of this whole thing. So I'd love to get your thoughts on, for people that have partners that snore or snore themselves, what can they start to do to really, eliminate that and start to breathe in a correct way so that they don't have to use a CPAP, possibly.
Yeah, great question. So, just like a few things come to mind here, and I know that in the work that you do, you're probably helping people balance their blood sugar, right? That affects our sleep quality. Another big thing that affects our sleep quality is circadian rhythm, right? So, and the reason I bring this up is because we can control these things during the day. So, you don't want to be, uh, just an unconscious breather at night and then, or during the day. And then at nighttime, you say, well, I'm going to focus on my breathing. You really got to
Mm.
focus on your breathing all day, every day. Just like you got to be mindful of your circadian rhythm throughout the day, just like you have to be mindful of your blood sugar throughout the day. So, what we do during the day transfers into the evening. So, we might think that when I go to sleep, I really can't control how I breathe. Well, you actually can by controlling how you breathe during the day.
Mm.
So first things first, I invite people to get used to placing their tongue at the roof of their mouth. So when they're not talking, so when Devin's speaking on this interview, my tongue goes right back to the roof of my mouth. My breath goes to 6 in, 6 out. And that's the way I want people to breathe for the majority of their day. Now, if you're working construction and you're physically exerting yourself, or you're in the gym, there's different breathing patterns for that. But for most people, you're sitting at your desk, reading email, responding to email, watching TV, reading a book, even cooking or mild exertion, 6 in, 6 out. That's going to get your nervous system into a state of coherence. It's going to increase oxygenation to the brain. It's going to slow down the aging process. Slowing down our breath is the fastest way to slow down the aging process.
Mm.
And it's going to shift your body into a parasympathetic state where you're healing every cell, tissue, organ, and system simultaneously. So it's really the state of all states to want to be in. And as a result of that, it's just going to put you in a much better physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual state. So that's the breathing that we want to do during the day. Now, what the other thing I want people to do is I want them to strengthen their diaphragm. So a diaphragm translates loosely to the word horizon. So the word diaphragm separates our heart and our lungs, and it's a muscle that goes right underneath our heart and our lungs and separates the rest of the abdominal trunk organs. And the diaphragm is referred to as the second heart. The diaphragm, with each breath that we take, moves up and down. So it's doing that 23,000 times a day, and it helps us breathe. Now, it's the only muscle that works 24/7 that we have conscious control over. So your diaphragm obviously keeps working while you're sleeping, keeps working consciously and unconsciously during the day. just like your heart does, but your heart you don't have conscious control over. You can, however, control your heart through the diaphragm. So
Hmm.
by slowing down our breathing throughout the day, that's going to get our heart in a nice, calm, rested state. Our lungs expand and contract. That gently squeezes the heart, allowing it to create pressure. And the diaphragm is an easy muscle for us to overlook. And it's also an easy muscle, thankfully, for us to strengthen. And the way you do this is by doing something called crocodile pose. Now, you can do this pose before you go to bed. You can do it when you wake up in the morning, you're already in a laying position, or you can find a time during the day to squeeze it in as well. Or if you're doing yoga or any exercising and you have some time to lay on your stomach, you can do it then. You're simply laying on your stomach with your hands on your head on your hands like this, and you're breathing into your belly. So for 2 minutes straight, you're going to breathe into your belly. If for whatever reason you can't lay on your stomach, it's uncomfortable or painful, then you could put some textbooks on your abdomen and you could breathe into your abdomen, or you could cross your arms and put them on your abdomen and breathe into your arms, again, trying to lift your arms up and down with each breath you take. So strengthening the diaphragm will make a huge difference because that's going to allow you to breathe properly. People use a CPAP machine. Keep in mind, what is the CPAP doing? The CPAP is creating pressure,
Hmm.
right? And guess what does that? Your diaphragm does that for you. So when the CPAP is doing all the breathing for you, even if you continue to need a CPAP, I encourage you to strengthen your diaphragm because the CPAP is going to weaken your diaphragm. It's almost like putting your diaphragm in a wheelchair for 8 hours. It's not going to get stronger. It's only going to get weaker. So just keep that in mind as well. The other thing that I would recommend in terms of reduction of snoring is going to be eliminating foods that you're sensitive to. So dairy generally tends to be very mucogenic. Alcohol before bedtime can also cause the airway to collapse because we're so relaxed. Muscle relaxers can do the same thing. Another big thing is sleeping position. So we encourage people just from a postural standpoint to sleep on their backs if they can help it. But you want to have a pillow that cradles your neck, not a pillow that kinks your neck into this position. Because when your neck gets kinked in that position, then it's like kinking a garden hose. That airway
Hmm.
collapses and you're creating a physical restriction in how you breathe. Side sleepers, I tend to go from side to side. I'll start off on my back. I always try to come back to my back, but then I'll find myself going from side to side. So you want to have a pillow that can support you on your back. If that's where you start off and that's where you want to be, we use something called a neck nest,
Yeah.
or you can get a latex pillow, which is a supportive pillow that allows you to go from one side to the other, and it provides a nice neutral position to your spine. Other things that you can do to help open up the airways and breathe correctly is again, focus on your tongue posture. So tongue should be at the roof of the mouth. That seals the mouth, keeps it nice and closed. And we're going to put a little piece of mouth tape just on our lips like this. We use something called 3M micropore tape, and that ensures that you're going to be breathing through your nose as much as possible. There is a protocol, and remind me, I'll go through the protocol for mouth taping in a second. And
Okay.
then for some people, we might want to, if your sinuses are clogged up all the time, there's actually something called nose clearing exercises that you can do. So by simply taking full breath in and then a relaxed exhale, another full breath in and then a relaxed exhale. So relaxed exhale is where you just let the air out, you don't blow it out. And then you just plug your nose like this. And then you could move your head around, up and down, side to side. Keep holding your breath. Obviously, I'm talking, but holding your breath. And you do that 3 or 4 times for 3 or 4 breath holds, and you'll find your nose instantly opens up. Okay.
Wow.
So that could be a great way. A navage is another great way to kind of clean out the inside of the sinuses. Navage is it's basically like a neti pot on steroids. So it's very gentle. So you have water going in one side with a saline solution and then a little vacuum sucking it out the other side. Great way to cleanse the sinuses, remove any like pollen and other debris, dust, things like that can get in there. And then what I add to my sinuses before I go to bed is something called Nasya oil. So Nasya oil is an Ayurvedic formula, and it's just a few drops of oil, 4 drops of oil in each nostril, and I just tilt my head back for a few minutes and let it kind of lubricate the inside of my sinuses. So it's like a sinus conditioning oil, and purifies, cleanses the sinuses. You have great dreams. It also helps with increasing focus as well. So those are some things that can be helpful. And then the last thing and I'm happy to share a guide on this whole process, is we have tongue exercises and swallowing exercises that we have our clients do. So these exercises help strengthen the muscles in the tongue, and they also help the tongue go through its full ranges of motion, which a lot of people don't do. So one of the exercises is sticking your tongue out as far as you can. Another exercise is rolling your tongue back. Another exercise is pushing into one cheek and then pushing into the other cheek. Another exercise is trying to swallow your tongue, right? So we just take the tongue through its ranges of motion. And these are things that can improve the tongue positioning, but then also swallowing exercises we recommend will also create more patency in the tube, in the airway. So we can do these. These are really fun, and they're really challenging, actually. So what you're going to do is you're going to make a nice wide smile like this. Okay. And then you're going to place your tongue at the roof of your mouth. And you're going to gently push your tongue forward as you do that. And then you're going to swallow.
Hmm.
Okay. And then you're going to look down, do the same thing. Swallow and look up and do the same thing.
Hmm.
And you might find that that's a little bit harder than it sounds, right? So it's really going to,
Interesting.
yeah. So it's really going to help you in strengthening the airway. Another thing that I want to mention is there's an easy way to assess if your arch in your face is wide enough. And you'll notice this on me. So when I open up my smile nice and wide, see how there's space here?
Yeah.
All right. So that space shouldn't be there.
Really? Okay.
And you can see that yours is, you got a little bit, but mine is more prominent. So we want to see when somebody opens up their smile nice and wide, we see as little black on the sides as possible. Okay. And of course, there's variation there, but that's kind of a telltale sign that somebody's dental arch could be a little bit wider. So I've never had any braces or dental work done. Fortunately, I've never even had a cavity. And sometimes I wish I did. I feel like I could probably. So I do something called mewing exercises, which helps push my jaw outwards. And I think you saw the before and after picture of just by simply changing the way I breathe, my facial structure has changed over the years as well.
Wanted to talk to you about that. I mean, do you think changing, strengthening, I guess mewing exercises strengthen the facial muscles and the muscles of the jaw. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And would strengthening those muscles help with people that have snoring issues as well? Would that be something that we'd throw into the protocol, or is that
Yeah.
something kind of separate?
Well, those are the swallowing exercises are part of the snoring protocol.
Got
Yeah.
it.
So we'd
Okay.
want to do that. And then there's something else that I mentioned at the event that's probably worth mentioning here is the reason people's airways are smaller than ever before is because of how soft our food has become.
Mm.
So we used to, Weston A. Price, a very famous dentist, and when they asked him, why are people's like teeth like literally rotting out of their faces? Why are people's teeth falling out? Why are their dental arches so small? Why are their teeth crowding? And why are there so many cavities? And what he postulated, which I think was part of the story, was that we are eating a lot of processed foods and grains, right? And they noticed that when they changed their diet to eating more, processed foods that are nutrient deprived, that people's, teeth started becoming problematic. But that's only half of the story. The other half of the story is not only are they eating processed foods, but they're eating mechanically processed foods, which means foods are softer than ever before. And so, if you ever give a child a toothbrush, uh, you'll notice that the first thing that they do is they don't brush their teeth. Even though they've watched you brush your teeth like their entire life, they start chewing it, right? Intuitively, they start biting it and chewing it. And then we have to like get on them about it. But they're trying to teach us something that you're not supposed to be brushing your teeth. You're supposed to be chewing, and that actually strengthens your teeth, right? So animals in nature and even our hunter-gatherer ancestors used to chew approximately 4 hours a day. So if
Wow.
you think about how much chewing is involved, right, that allows better extraction of the nutrients, right? Remember, plant foods are encapsulated in cell walls, which we can't break through unless we mechanically break through them. So chewing our food is extraordinarily beneficial for the production of stomach acid, for telling the digestive system food is coming, for tasting our food, for assessing the nutrients that are coming in. And more importantly, it's also, or just as importantly, it's important for forming our jaws. So if you ever look at the skulls of people from hundreds of years ago, you would notice that they had perfectly straight teeth. If you look at my parents, my grandparents, my great grandparents, they all have perfectly straight teeth and perfect arches and never had dentists, never had braces, never had cavities until they moved here. What they would do growing up is they would chew on a neem branch. And so they didn't have toothbrushes. It sounds kind of weird, but they didn't have toothbrushes. They had branches to chew on. And so by chewing on these branches, they'd be chewing hard stuff,
Hmm.
right? And that would stimulate and strengthen their teeth. But then the oils from the branch, like the neem oil, would help enhance their oral microbiome. And then they would bristleize the end of the branch and then they would brush their teeth with it. So they, in effect, they had a toothbrush, but they had to work to make the toothbrush by chewing off the end of this branch. And then, they obviously it's biodegradable, so that they just toss that away or throw it in the fire. But it's kind of interesting how things that we would think as such a developed society, like when I went there for the first time when I think I was 9 at the time. I'm like, this is so weird. This is so barbaric. Like we're so advanced here. And then only to realize that they had it right all along. So it's kind of interesting. So you may not be able to find neem branches to chew on. I think you can order them on Amazon actually. But what you can do is you can chew on silicone blocks. So you can actually buy something called chewing blocks. And these just go in the back of your molars and you just chew on them. And 15 minutes a day, it's like a great exercise for your jaw. And it's a great way to help increase saliva production, which protects our teeth, and also a great way to strengthen our teeth as well. Because, in this day and age, like I think longevity is like such a big thing that we're trying to aim for. Everyone wants to live a little bit longer or a lot
Hmm.
longer. And, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that we have to keep our teeth for our entire lives or at least as long as we can. Because once our dental health goes downhill, then a lot of our other health systems start going downhill as well.
Man, so much. I took you up on your recommendation and got I think it was Phallium gum, the
Phalum gum, yeah.
Phallium gum, and I've been and also I ordered some. It wasn't neem branches, it was miswax or
Miswak, yeah.
and wow, very interesting. Both I'm it's very I encourage anyone listening to this to just to try it and notice. I mean, you feel it. You
Oh yeah.
totally feel it. And it's just interesting that sort of some of the practices and the things that our ancestors did now are coming back. And it's
Mhm.
kind of like it's common sense stuff, but it's stuff that we don't really think about unless it's pointed out, like eating harder food, right? Not eating such soft food. I mean, all these things it's like it's almost yeah like just like breathing, it's so simple but yet for some reason we just overlook it.
Well, it's, my philosophy now is that if it isn't embarrassingly simple, I don't want to talk about
I love that.
it.
I love it, yeah, because I mean and even the simple stuff it's like it can get complicated, right? There's
Mhm.
like so and life is so I love that approach. I think an essentialism simplistic approach people actually can take action on. If it gets too complicated or too overwhelming, which I feel like that's where most people are at, they're just overwhelmed. They don't know what to do. It's like, so here are some simple practices that can actually make a huge difference. And you got to be motivated to actually do them, right? That's the other
Yep.
thing. It's like, and I think now that people are hearing all the benefits of breath, what this can do, what it can protect you from, hopefully that's enough to then have people at least start to try some of these things that you're sharing here.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to have the knowledge, it's a whole other thing to actually take action on it.
Hmm.
And so I really just want to encourage everyone listening to this to whatever kind of jumped out at you so far, take action on it. Whatever little thing that Sachin, shared in this conversation up in this point, take action on it. Try it. Be an experimenter of your health. And I love that you said I think it was your quote. It was the doctor of the future is the patient. That's I wrote that down,
Hmm.
and I love that. Because it's like all this knowledge is it's here. It's just a matter of us really taking action on it and understanding that it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be simple, and it's has such a profound effect.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of things I'll share in just kind of reinforcing what you said is that it doesn't have to be complicated, but it does have to be simple. And the simpler we can keep it, the more inclusive we can be. And the thing with breath is that, what we'll find in the next probably 5 to 10 years is that every elite athlete will have a breath coach because it's an untapped opportunity. When we think about habit change, there's three key factors to habit change. One is motivation. So hopefully we've given you some motivation to improve at least the consciousness of breathing. The second is ability. We all have the ability to tap into our breath, and because we're already doing it. And the third one is prompt. So the way I kind of lean in on this, and it just takes a little bit of habit forming, but what's the thing that you think about the most? For some people, it's their children. For some people, it's their phone. For some people, it's their email. For some people, it's whatever, right? So pick that thing you think of the most. Maybe pick the top three things that you think of the most. And then the second thing you think of is your breath. So every time I think of my son, I think of my breath next. Every time I
Mm.
pick up my phone, I think of my breath. Every time I check my email, I think of my breath because my breath is my companion, right? And it's like my guide and my companion because if I alter my breath, it's going to allow me to do whatever that activity is more effectively. So if I'm at the gym, I'm going to be more effective. If I'm checking my email, I'm going to be more effective. If I'm communicating with my wife, not only am I going to pay attention to how I'm breathing because I want to hold space for her, but I'm going to pay attention to how she's breathing because I can tell from her slight subtle shift in her breath if she wants to have this conversation or not. Okay. And so breath plays such an important role, and it's basically a window into our nervous system. By paying attention to how somebody's breathing, if I was sitting here breathing like this, it would be hard for you to have, it'd be hard for us to have a conversation. But like, dude, like, what the hell is wrong with you, right? But if I'm sitting here having a nice, casual, calm, soothing conversation with you, well, I better pay attention to how I'm breathing, right? So it's my unfair
Mm.
advantage as well. And I know one thing I wanted to mention is, and I don't want to leave people without this knowledge, is I want to share just a couple of breathing techniques that I think would be helpful for them.
Please, yes, absolutely. And then I want to talk about tools, like
Sure.
technology tools to help bring that awareness, because I think that's very helpful for people to
Okay,
have that
cool.
subjective data. So yeah, please.
So I'll keep it quick. But here's what I want you to know. There's probably like 3 or 4 breathing techniques that I use all the time. One of them is called coherence breathing. Super easy, super boring, yet super effective. So tongue at the roof of the mouth, jaw nice and relaxed, breathing in for a count of 6, breathing out for a count of 6. This is your default breathing pattern. So when in doubt, this is the way you should be breathing. When you're driving, reading a book, doing the dishes, relaxing, having a conversation on a Zoom meeting, that's how we should be breathing. Second breathing technique I want to talk about is called a physiologic sigh. This is the fastest way to go from fight or flight to parasympathetic rest and digest. It's really simple. You'll take a 3-stage breath. So you'll fully exhale, breathe in to the belly through the nose, tongue at the roof of the mouth, breathe into the chest, and one more sip of air, either through your nose or through your mouth into the throat. And then just hold. And then we're going to drop the tongue on the count of 3 and audibly exhale with a sigh. 1, 2, 3. Letting the air all the way out, repeating that 3 or 4 times. You do this in the car if you don't want to bring work stress into the home. You could do it in your car if you don't want to bring home stress to the office. And it's a great way to reset in between appointments if you're working with clients. It's a great tool to give to your clients as well. You could start your appointments this way.
Mm.
The third breath is a breathing technique that can help you fall asleep faster. And this is 4-7-8 breath. Andrew Weil talks about this.
Mm.
And it's basically breathing in for a count of 4, in through the nose, tongue at the roof of the mouth, holding for a count of 7, and then exhaling for a count of 8. Now, if that's too complicated for you, you can do the 6 in, 8 out, or you can do 6 in, 10 out. Anything that we do to lengthen the exhale is going to get us into a more relaxed state. So
Powerful.
those are some simple techniques that you can use. Let's start with 3. And I'm going to share a whole series of tools with you and your team that you guys are more than welcome to share with your audience.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That would be incredible. We'll definitely put that below this conversation, wherever this is posted as well. Um, so let's talk a little bit about some of the technology that can help us just have some more feedback or more information or help some of the breath training. I'd love to get your thoughts on some of the tools, the technology that you're finding useful for people
Okay.
that are looking to dive deeper into breath awareness and breath optimization and using breath to as a tool.
Okay, absolutely. So there's a few things that I like. One is an app called Snore Lab. Snore Lab is a free app that you can get. It tracks your nighttime breathing. So if you're snoring, it's going to pick up on those patterns. So really simple, great tool to have that self-awareness. Doesn't cost anything. It's a free intervention. You can get the paid version. I think it's like $15 for the year, and it allows you to have a whole bunch of other features unlocked. The second tool is called the Moonbird. So a Moonbird is a little handheld device, and it almost feels like a water balloon slash bird. It's got this nice latex feel to it. And basically it expands and contracts. So with different breathing cadences, the little moonbird will expand and contract. So you don't have to sit there and count your breaths. It's doing it for you, but you know exactly when to breathe in and exactly when to breathe out. And then for those of you that like to go even deeper and perhaps would even consider hiring a digital breathing coach, then there's something called the Oxa Band. And the Oxa Band is a wearable device that goes around just below your rib cage, and it's tracking your heart rate, your HRV, your respiratory rate, your calmness state. And it's
Hmm.
also an app that can coach you through different breathing patterns and different breath holds and different breathing techniques. So that's a great tool for people to use as well.
Amazing. The band, do you find that it's pretty accurate as far as in your experience using it for a set amount of time?
Oh yeah, it's pretty wild. So you can actually use it for research purposes. That's the level of
Wow.
quality of the band.
Okay.
And so there's an actual research dashboard and platform for coaches to be able to use as well with their students. And
Amazing.
it's pretty cool to be able to see yourself and what's happening in real time as your breath is changing. You can see your heart rate changing, your HRV changing, the calmness state of your nervous system changing. It's all happening in real time for you.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love when we can take subjective and objective and sort of I think it's very, very helpful for people to have both of the feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the things I think that really helps people stay active and motivated to continue to make progress on whatever they're focusing on. I know you mentioned also we talked about nitrous oxide in the beginning of this conversation. There are some strips that you mentioned, and then we'll wrap
Uh-huh.
up the conversation here.
Sure. We might need to do a part two. There's so much I'd like to
There
cover.
is.
So I do have a company that we use called Berkeley Life, and I know you know Nicole as well. And they make nitric oxide strips, so you can actually just place a strip on your tongue, measure your saliva levels, and within 10 seconds you'll know if your nitric oxide levels are where they need to be.
Awesome. Awesome. Sachin, listen, we definitely need a part two. We literally just scraped the surface here. There's so many more questions, but I just want to say thank you for the work you're doing. It
Thank you.
really is so powerful, so meaningful. This conversation is so valuable, is going to make a real impact on the people that listen to it. So I appreciate you, your work, your time, and I look forward to connecting with you in the future for round two.
My pleasure. Let's make it happen. We'll put it in the books. And thank you for your lovely community for listening, tuning in. And I hope this helps people breathe just a little bit better.
I'm sure it will. Thanks a lot, Sachin.
Thank you.